This is the moment I almost lost my fingers and $10,000. Olive wood is beautiful, but it's one of the most demanding materials you can work with. I didn't film the process of removing the bark, and I know many of you would love to see it. The truth is, cleaning olive wood properly is not something you can rush. It can take up to 2 full days for a single slab. It's exhausting work, and at that moment the camera was the last thing on my mind. Nothing is placed randomly because we want everything to look natural as possible and to be in shape and harmonious with the rest of the slabs inside the mold. Now it's time to mix some epoxy. The client had a very clear vision. He wanted the first layer of epoxy to be deep blue right on the edge with turquoise. I had to mix some different shades of blue and just look at how insanely good these powder pigments look. And after everything is mixed perfectly, it's time to pour our first bucket of epoxy. This is definitely the most satisfying part of this job and this project, so please enjoy the views. Now it's been almost 3 years since my last video, and I didn't publish not because I didn't want to, but because we had a lot of work to do and YouTube is just a full-time job for itself. It's not that easy. But in the meantime, I've been publishing YouTube shorts constantly, so you can see a majority of the projects we've been going through, and finally I put some effort in this YouTube video so you can see the whole process from start to finish. As you can see, I put this small cup of epoxy into the microwave. Warming the epoxy lowers its viscosity, which makes it much easier to mix and allows the air bubbles to rise and pop faster. Now I add the hardener and mix everything thoroughly. When working with epoxy, the mixing process is critical. It's not about mixing longer, but about mixing the right way and ensuring the epoxy is perfectly blended and uniform. That means you need 2 buckets, because you can never mix good enough into a first one, and you can see it right here. Then you pour the epoxy into another bucket and mix it again, making sure everything is perfectly blended. Okay, and now what we are going to do is pour this second bucket into a third one, the small one, because we made a lot of bubbles because of pouring into another one, and we want to get rid of them. So we will put them in the vacuum chamber and get rid of all those bubbles. You can see all those bubbles popping out, and millions of them. And when every single bubble disappeared, we continued to pour the remaining crystal clear, fully transparent layer of epoxy. And why is that? Well, because we want to make that true three-dimensional effect that allows the boards to be observed from within as if they are floating in the resin. Because light travels through the transparent layers, reflects off the olivewood, and that gives the table its unique sense of space. After everything was poured, I let the epoxy cure for full 2 weeks so it would be ready for processing. To get this off the table, I had to use some airbags, and those airbags produce some really good sounds. Now I will let you enjoy this as well. Took me a quite long time to get this off because I didn't have anyone to help, and it's too heavy. The moment I released this thing, I had to put it on the CNC router, and that's when I came to the dumbest idea ever, because I wanted to do everything by myself and this thing was just too heavy. I mean, this thing is 120 kilos or 260 pounds heavy, and I don't even know why I tried to do this alone, because there was no way this will end in a good way. Fortunately, nothing terrible happened, not a single crack or a scratch on the tabletop, and I just hurt my fingers a little bit. And I deserved it. I spent half an hour fighting with this tabletop just to put it on a CNC router, and after that I just wanted to leave, but the clients are waiting. Yeah, I'm still shaking. Almost lost my finger. Yeah. these rollers are done. Oh my god, so heavy. So I continued with the next step, which is CNC routing or CNC flattening, whichever way do you like it more. And I had to replace the blades for the new one because the olivewood it's so dense, it's so hard that makes new blades dull in a very short period of time. It took about 6 hours for CNC router to flatten both sides, and once everything was nice and smooth, the real work began. When I started doing this table, I knew from the beginning it wouldn't be easy because once you flatten the olive wood, it reveals so much cracks and micro holes and voids and everything you just don't want to see after the CNC routing. Well, it had to be done. This table had millions of cracks, not figuratively but literally, and every single one had to be sealed properly. So we mixed some top coat epoxy and started to fill in those cracks. Some fills took minutes, some took hours, and some demanded we wait. Let the resin cure, sand the surface, and start all over again. Over and over. There are no shortcuts here. If even one crack is left untreated, it will show later, during sanding, polishing, or worse, years down the line, and that's not acceptable. Once all the cracks were finally filled and everything was sealed properly, we could move forward. Now the focus shifts from construction to perfection. So when the CNC is flattening the tabletop, it leaves like these burned marks. If you see this one. Yeah, okay, I sanded most of them down, but there is always somewhere the marks. So we are looking for them. You can see these straight lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, this one is. So the client didn't like the straight edges of the table and asked if we could imitate a live edge, and honestly, why not? I sketched out a rough shape following the natural grain lines of the wood. Then I grabbed the jigsaw and started shaping the edges, tilting the saw at a slight angle so everything would look as natural as possible. I was happy how it turned out, so I rotated the table and repeated the whole process on the other side. You can also see here how the jigsaw is having the hard time going through the olivewood, especially because of the angle I set for the natural look. I was happy with the both sides and I could finally proceed further and cut the short sides of the tabletop using the fast tool track saw. And now you can see 1 millimeter is missing to cut through the whole tabletop because I use Festool TS55 and I don't have the 75. Now we need to remove this somehow. Before we can pour any tabletop epoxy, we need to fully prepare the surface, finishing the edges, smoothing everything out and sanding the entire piece to the same grit until it's nice and smooth. Okay, so everything feels nice and smooth. Now we are going for the final sand with 240 grit, so we can make a flat coat because the client really wants the high gloss tabletop. I clean the surface with 99% alcohol to make sure all the dust is completely removed, so nothing interferes with this tabletop epoxy pour. So the tabletop is finally ready for the flat coat and the surface is clean as much as possible. And let's mix some epoxy. The main difference between tabletop and deep pour epoxy is that tabletop epoxy cures much harder in a much thinner layer. That's exactly why it's called tabletop epoxy. It's more durable and better suited for surface coatings. We begin pouring the resin slowly across the entire surface of the table, carefully making sure that every edge, every corner and every detail is fully covered. The epoxy slows gently over the wood, naturally leveling itself and creating a perfectly smooth surface. As this happens, the depth becomes stronger, the colors grow richer, and the natural grain of the wood suddenly comes alive in a way it never did before. This is the moment where patience pays off. After countless hours of preparation, sanding and shaping, everything finally comes together. There's nothing left to do but to step back, slow down, and simply watch the magic happen. But of course, nothing ever goes perfectly, and this time was no different. From time to time, tiny bubbles kept appearing out of invisible cracks deep inside the wood, even when the surface looked flawless. Each of those bubbles had to be dealt with individually, so we stopped the process and carefully filled them. In this case, we used UV resin, allowing us to seal the cracks quickly before continuing on with the sanding process. After that, we moved on to the underside of the table, sanding away any drips left from the flat coat and applying a fresh finish. And then comes 100 years of sanding, starting at 180 grit and slowly working our way up to 4000. After successfully making it through the most tedious and time consuming part of the process, it's finally time for the last and most satisfying step of this journey. This is where everything comes together. Using three different polishing compounds, we slowly bring the surface to life, refining it step by step until it reaches a deep, glass-like finish. It's the moment where all the patience, effort, and hours of work finally pay off. I do the final inspection using an LED light to check for any marks or areas that haven't been polished properly. Once everything is perfect, the final step is applying a paint protection film, making this table fully resistant to scratches. With that done, it's time to step back and reveal the finished piece. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next build. Bye.